The prison sits on a ridge above the town of Glentwood, Virginia. The way most things in Wise County sit, high up, visible from every road coming in, part of landscape so long that people stopped really seeing it decades ago. My father drove past it every morning on his way to the mine, and his father drove past it before that. By the time I was old enough to understand what the building on the ridge actually was, it had already become just another fact of the place I grew up in. I took the overnight shift there 9 years ago. My name is Jesse Kane. I was 26 years old and I thought I knew what I was walking into. On my third night on the job, a senior officer named Harlan Bowman stood mid-stride during a count walk through C block and looked at the far end of the corridor. Cell 14. It was empty for years, nothing there, just a cell, dark and quiet, same as the others. He said, "Don't ever count the last cell." I asked him, why? He looked at me the way people in these mountains look at you when they have decided you are going to have to learn something the hard way. Then he said, because whatever in there, you don't want to thinking you are paying it special attention. That was my introduction to the 5 rules. Nobody puts them in any manual. Nobody mentions them in orientation. You learn them the way people in Appalachia learn most things that matter, quietly, from someone who's been there long enough to know. It passed from person to person like something too important to write down and too dangerous to forget. Rule 1. Never count cell 14 in C block last. Harlan explained the rest of it to me eventually. Over the course of several conversations spread across my first year, not all at once, and a little at time. The way you explain something to a person you are not entirely sure is going to hear it. Cell 14 in C block has been empty for years, and as long as anyone currently working that facility can remember. The official reason, if you ask anyone in administration, is that the cell has structural issues that makes it unsustainable for occupancy. There is maintenance note file from the 2019 that references a crack in the rear wall. Nobody has repaired it. Nobody has assigned anyone to it. What Harlan told me is that the cell was occupied until the late 90s by a man whose name I'm not going to use it here out of respect for his family, some of whom are still alive in that county. He died in that cell. The official cause of death is in the record. What is not in the record is what the officer who found him described in the break room afterward, quietly, to the people he trusted. That when he opened the cell door, he had the absolute certainty, before he turned on the light, before he saw anything, that something in that room was looking back at him. Not the man, something else, something that had been there alongside the man, and now, with the man gone, he was alone. 3 officers over the years have reported the same sensation when doing count near cell 14. Not inside the cell, near it, a feeling of being watched from inside room that they know is empty. The rule exists because of what happened to a new officer in 2011 who didn't know it yet. He did his count walk, and out of habit or instinct, or just the natural tendency to end the routine at the last point in the sequence, he counted cell 14 last. He stood in front of it for an extra moment, the way you do when you are making sure you haven't miscounted. He called in sick the next day, and the day after that, he resigned his position at the end of the week and never came back to the facility. Harlan ran into him at a gas station about a year later. He said the man looked fine, healthy and normal, but when Harlan asked him how he was doing, the man said, "Better, since I stopped thinking about what looked back at me through that window." Harlan said he didn't ask anything else. Rule 2. If an inmate tells you something is in his cell with him, write it down and keep the paper. This one sounds ridiculous until you understand what it's actually for. Inmates report a lot of things: noise complaints, temperature complaints, issues with other inmates, medical concerns. You develop a filter over time for what requires immediate attention and what can wait. What an inmate tells you is in his cell with him gets filtered through that same system, and 9 times out of 10, it's a mental health situation that gets routed to the appropriate staff. The 10th time is different. Senior Officer Patricia Marsh, who retired 2 years ago after 31 years at the facility, and who was the person Harlan pointed me toward when I felt I needed to hear something from someone with more credibility than he had, described it to me this way. She said that in 31 years she had heard dozens of inmates report a presence in their cells. Most of them were in obvious psychological distress, and those she documented and referred appropriately. But a small number, she said maybe 8 or 9 over her entire career, were different. The inmates were calm, coherent, not distressed. They weren't reporting something that scared them. They were reporting something the way you would report a factual observation, a piece of information they thought the staff should have. Patricia said these were the ones she wrote down and kept. I asked her what made them different. She said the details. When somebody is having a mental health episode, the details are personal. They connect to a person's history, their fears, their specific psychology. When this inmate described what they were reporting, the details weren't personal. They were specific in a different way, specific to the building, to the history of that building, to things that happened in rooms this inmate had no way of knowing anything about. She showed me once a paper she'd kept from 1994, an inmate's exact word, written down the night he reported them. I'm not going to repeat what the word was on the paper, but I'll tell you that one of the details he described very specifically, including a location within that facility and time frame, matched an incident that had occurred in that facility in 1987, 7 years before that inmate arrived, and in a section of the building he had never access to. Patricia said she'd looked it up after writing it down. That's why she kept the paper. I, for me, now keep a small notebook in my locker. 3 entries so far in 9 years, all 3 calm, coherent, specific in the way Patricia described. I haven't looked up all of them yet. I'm not entirely sure I want to. Rule 3. If the power goes out, do not use your personal flashlight in the West Yard. Power outages at the facility are uncommon but not rare. The building has a backup generator that kicks in without about 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, the facility operates on emergency lighting, dim, red-tinged enough to maintain basic visibility and security. Most officers carry personal flashlights for exactly this situation. The rule says don't use your flashlight in the West Yard. The West Yard is the outdoor recreation area on the western side of the facility. During the day, it's used for outdoor exercises. At night it's empty, fenced, monitors by camera. During a power outage, the cameras go down until the generator kicks in. 2 officers, in separate incidents 4 years apart, use personal flashlights in the West Yard during power outages. I know both of them. Neither of them will discuss what they saw in the beam of the flashlight in any detail. What I know is that one of them requested a permanent transfer to the day shift following a week, citing a preference change, and the other one began taking a different route to his car at the end of every shift, along a route that avoids the West Yard entirely, and has done so every single day for 6 years. I asked the second one, carefully, what he'd seen. He said something that wasn't supposed to be here. I asked if it was an inmate. He said no. I asked him if it was an animal. He looked at me for a moment, then he said, I don't know what it was. I know what it wasn't, and I know I'd rather walk the long way around every day for the rest of my life than find out if it's still out here. That was the end of the conversation. I have never used my personal flashlight in the West Yard. I follow the long route to my car every night, same as he does. Some information you don't need firsthand. Rule 4. Never tell an inmate what year it is if he doesn't already know. This is the rule that took me the longest to understand. It's also the one that I think, if you sit with it long enough, it's the most unsettling of the rules. Prison exists outside of ordinary time in a way that's difficult to describe to someone who hasn't spent significant time in one. The routine is the same every day. The lighting is the same. The sounds are the same. Inmates who have been incarcerated for years or decades often lose track of time in ways that go beyond simply not knowing the date. They lose a relationship with time, passing that most of us take completely for granted. Most of the time, when an inmate asks you what year it is, it's exactly what it appears to be, a man who lost track of time asking a simple question. But there's a specific version of this interaction that senior officers learn to recognize. And when they recognize it, the rule says you don't answer. You know the interaction, you inform mental health staff, and you do not confirm the year. The version that triggers the rule is this. An inmate asking what year it is who does not appear confused, who does not appear to be having a mental health episode, who asks the question with a specific kind of focus, calm, deliberate, and almost formal, and who, when you look at them in the moment of asking, seems somehow uncertain about where they are as much as when. I have encountered this version of the interaction twice in 9 years, both times with inmates who had been at the facility for a long time. Both times the question was asked in the East Corridor, which I mention not because I'm certain it's relevant, but because I noticed and wrote it down. Patricia's explanation for the role, which she gave me carefully and with a long pause before she started, was this. There are people in this building who have been here so long and have lost so much of themselves to the time passing that something else has started filling the space. She said she didn't know what that something else was. She said she knew that it asked what year it was when it was trying to orient itself. And she said that giving it that information felt, to every senior officer she discussed with it, like the wrong thing to do, like answering a question for someone who has no business asking it. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if any of the 5 rules I just told you have any explanation that would hold up in daylight, outside these mountains, outside this building. What I know is that Harlan Bowman followed all 5 rules for 22 years and retired in a good health and a peace of mind. And Patricia followed all 5 of them for 31 years and said on her last shift that the building had been strange to her every single night she'd work on it, and that the rules had been the difference between strange and unbearable. That's enough for me, 9 years in, and it's still enough. Thank you so much for listening to the very end. You might have noticed a change recently. I have started narrating these stories with my actual voice. If you want to hear more and help support this journey, please leave a like and subscribe because it means the world to me. And I want to say lastly, a huge thank you.